Hi, Primary 3. Today we're going to be writing a newspaper report. So we're going to be learning how to write a great newspaper report. So we've done this before a couple of times in class. So I'm hoping some of you will remember a little bit about how we wrote a great newspaper report. I want you to think about your success criteria all the time that I've put in the virtual classroom whilst you're writing your report, and make sure that you keep on going back to it and looking at it just to make sure that you've got everything in it that we should do. So today we are going to be writing about a Viking raid. Okay, so at your own time, watch the clip that I've put in below to see what a Viking raid could have looked like. Okay, I'm not going to play it just now because it's a good 5 minutes long, and that means that you'd be listening to me for far too long. So when you come out and finish listening to me, you can go back in, and if you're watching this on a laptop or a computer, make sure you go into full presentation mode so that you can play the clip. So it just gives you an idea of what a Viking raid would look like. What I want you to do as you're watching it, think about all those fantastic words that you could include in your newspaper report. And once you're finished, you could close your eyes and think about what you would see, what would you hear, and what would you smell. You could create a word bank to try and help you when you're writing your newspaper report as well. Okay, so think very carefully about what you think would happen when Vikings would raid a local village. So when we're writing our newspaper reports, I want you to think about some important things. So this is what we've got to do in our newspaper report. So the first thing that you need to think about is that you need to have an eye-catching headline so that people will read your story. Remember, we've talked about below that if you don't have an eye-catching headline and it's a pretty boring headline, people aren't then going to read the rest of what you have written. So you need to think about a really eye-catching headline that people are going to think, oh, I want to read the rest of that story. So for example, I've done Vikings attack village in terrible raid. So straight away I'd be thinking, oh, I want to find out a little bit more about what happened there. So make sure that your headline is quite eye-catching. The next thing that you've got to think about is that we have to make sure that the information that you're writing goes in the correct order, and you want the most important information coming first. So this is where we would use some of the words that we've used lots of times now, our time sequence words. And you want to think about the order that you're writing your newspaper report. So for example, one of your first lines could be, first the Vikings arrived in their long ships and ran to the village from the river. That's the first thing that's happening. So we need to make sure that we write about that first. What we wouldn't want to write about first is that the Vikings then sailed away in their long ships, because that's the thing that happened last. So remember, when we're writing our newspaper reports, we need to make sure that we're putting the events that happened in the correct order using your time sequence word. That's what we've talked about lots. Now, the next thing you need to think about when you're writing your newspaper report is that you need to keep it exciting to keep people reading. It's like our boring sentences that we did the other day, girls and boys, when we were thinking about how we could make those sentences more interesting. We absolutely need to do that when we're writing a newspaper report, because again, if it's not keeping people excited, they're just going to stop reading. And we don't want them to do that. We want them to keep reading our newspaper reports. So think about some wow words that are adjectives that you could use. You could think about, how would the villagers be feeling? So for example, I've written, the villagers were petrified of the savage Vikings. You could write about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're smelling as the newspaper reporter. You could write about what the Vikings looked like, what they sounded like. There's loads of really good stuff that you can write in this newspaper report about what would happen in a Viking raid. Lots of brilliant writing opportunities for this. Now, the last thing that we want to think about is that you need to include a picture of what's happened. So remember, we always leave that little space for our picture. So again, that the readers of your newspaper report will get an idea of what they think happened by looking at your picture. So I want you to draw a picture of what one of the villagers might have seen. You can make sure you make it clear and colourful to get people's attention. Okay, so if you just draw it in black and white, then it's not going to leap off out the page. Okay, so you want to make it nice and colourful and clear so that people can see exactly what it is. Now, here I've got a little example of what a typical newspaper report could look like, just showing you all the things that we've just been talking about. So at the top here, they've actually written the name of their newspaper as well, and you can include that if you want. Underneath that, they've then written their headline. So the Guerrilla Gardener with green fingers. And what you might notice here, girls and boys, is that they've used quite a lot of words that begin with G, guerrilla, garden, and green. And that's a really good way of catching people's attention by including words that have the same letters. Now, it needs to make sense when we're writing our headline, because if you're writing words that don't make sense in the headline, then it won't look great on the page. So you need to make sure that the headline is really eye-catching. Now, when you look at this example here, you'll see that the events are in order. So again, we've got some time words they've used on Tuesday, on Friday, yesterday, and we would be using words like first, next, then, finally, all the things that we've included. And then finally, they've got their little picture here of the Guerrilla Gardener, and they've even included what we call a caption underneath it. So it says here, the Guerrilla Gardener has started a business in Twinkletown. So you could write a little caption describing what's happening in your picture. This is what an example of a newspaper report could look like. Now, I've written my own newspaper report of what our Viking newspaper report could look like. So I've called my newspaper the Saxon Times, and my headline is Vikings Attack Village. And here's what I've written. Yesterday, there was a terrible attack on a local village. Fierce men and women with long swords and wooden shields ran from longships from the river. First, they shouted and screamed at the village people, scaring them all. Next, they went into their houses and stole their money and animals. Then they went into the church and carried away all the gold. Finally, they set fire to every house, leaving them burning brightly, and ran back to their ships. So that's what I've written, girls and boys. Now, it's not very long. So if you wanted to add more detail to your newspaper report, feel free. It doesn't have to be just a page long. If you want to write more, then fantastic. If you don't want to write a page, then again, that's fine. Just write as much as you feel you can. Now, my picture is not very good, girls and boys, and Kirsten actually said that to me. She said, you haven't put very much effort into your picture, Mum. And it's probably quite true. It was quite a quick picture that I've just drawn. So I'd like to see your pictures much better than my pictures. So that's what we're looking for today for a newspaper report. In your assignment, I have attached some templates for you to write your newspaper report on, or you can do exactly like I've done, which is just a blank piece of paper and drawn lines on it. There's also some planning attachments in there as well, just in case you want to plan your writing. We've used our time sequence words lots, so hopefully you should know them all already. I'm really looking forward to seeing all your fantastic reports. I loved reading all your persuasive stories last week, so I'm really looking forward to seeing your reports this week. Have a good day. Bye.